What's up, traders? Matt from the Trade Brigade here with your weekend crypto report, where as always, I do a technical analysis and give you my thoughts on the coins listed up above. We did go ahead and remove Zcash, and in its place, we've, sort of added here Apecoin. It's the popular coin right now. It is actually breaking out of a range as well. So it's something interesting to look at, as we'll find as we move through a majority of our core coins here. There's some pretty boring charts out there to look at. So nonetheless, let's kick things off on our Bitcoin daily time frame. This happens to be one of those boring charts, so bear with me for just a moment here. Overall, stuck sideways in this range. I mean, we're very, very clearly closer to the midpoint as opposed to at the edge. When we are at the edges, we know we can get a breakout or a mean reversion. Same is true, but opposite at the bottom for a mean reversion or a breakdown. And when you're in the middle, again, your edge just quite literally does not exist here. It's 50-50. Does it bounce or does it continue to break down towards the bottom end of the range is the question that we're trying to answer. A complicating factor here inside of Bitcoin is just the fact that we're sitting right on this prior triple bottom, right? So I could see this going either way, to be quite frank with you. And again, I know that's not incredibly helpful for you, but if this does move lower, I could easily see the case for, okay, we're at triple bottom support from in the past. Maybe it's a long here, tight stop, and looking for a little bit of a bounce, trail your stop higher because we're kind of in chop zone. You would want to lock those profits in. Or I could see, just as equally the case for a breakdown of this support. So if you're on a platform that allows the shorting of coins, then any subsequent lower highs that build this out as a flush point, then fine. Again, that looks valid as well, taking the breakdown of $37,500 per coin. So just to give you some numbers, again, this interaction point, sort of the pivot that we're monitoring in the short term, is $37,500 per coin. If it breaks down, the bottom end of the daily balance is at $34,350 per coin. And if this were to turn around, my first target to make that trade sort of worth it, trying to long this at support here, would be back up towards this first significant lower high after the look above and fail. That would be here at $42,200 per coin. All right. So that's Bitcoin in a nutshell. A very, very difficult location as of right now and fairly boring, right? We're not really getting any sort of trend that's being established. It's very, very sideways here. It's days up, it's days down, it's days back up. Choppy. Okay. So that's Bitcoin. Let's continue along and get into Ethereum here. What do we see on Ethereum's chart? Certainly getting into the support trend line. This one had much cleaner, higher lows, and it still has the possibility to hold this as a higher low. But based on the interactions with this trend line, I'm not overly convinced that it's going to hold this time around. The main reason is because we continuously see lower highs coming into it. We printed a large hammer. Okay. So this candle right here, it's a large green hammer, right? Lower wick right off the support trend line. We actually took out the high of that candle and the subsequent one that ended up closing red, but we did take that out and there was just zero follow through up into these prior highs. So that's sort of red flag number one. Red flag number two is that on a subsequent test on that red candle, as we started to bounce out again, we actually formed a lower high underneath this prior area of support around 29.85. So I'm not placing a whole lot of faith into this support trend line as of right now. It's definitely not a buy. Now that we have multiple lower highs coming into it, we've failed to really bounce off of it. So instead, filling up the triangle is the idea here, and the target would be down towards 25.64. Okay, so that's the downside here. And when and if we were to get here, you could reevaluate and see if you can get some sort of a long there for the 100% retracement. Again, very rare that you just smash right through this. Generally speaking, you get a little bit of a dead cat bounce. If you form a lower high and then equal low reattempt in short proximity of time, this is really where you look for that breakdown to happen, not on the first test. So that's what I've got for you on the downside in Ethereum. If it is going to bounce off the support trend line, that's fine. Again, I wouldn't really be fishing for longs here. I would wait for a recapture of that 29.85 for either something that does high or low. You get it on the back test or you get it on the break of this high, right? And then your next target is simply up here, 32.45. So Ethereum, a little bit different, a little bit of relative strength compared to Bitcoin, but overall still flirting quite dangerously with a support trend line. Continuing along, Binance Coin, same sort of deal, right? Look at this hammer that printed right here, double bottom at the support trend line at horizontal area as well. There's a little bit of follow through, but right back down and sideways through time, breaking and violating that support trend line. So again, this one strikes me as being much more sideways and range bound instead of trying to build out a nice clean structure with higher lows. So we will remove that, currently sitting right on this shelf. Again, I probably wouldn't take the short here. If you are on a platform that can short cryptos, your breakdown point is underneath 383.50. That's this pivot low in here for something that just rotates to the bottom end of the overall range at at 357.90, call it 358 round number. If you want to get long on Binance Coin, then again, I don't really think now is the time to do it. I would either wait for a reversal pattern down here, look for that dead cat bounce, or if we can start to prove ourselves and do something like this turns into a breakout point at 423.50 only if we get some ascending wedge or triangle, type activity for the break to just revisit these pivot highs closer to 450, right? So it currently doesn't look like a likely scenario, but if that builds out, that's the only instance where I would try to get long in Binance Coin. Next up, we have Cardano, ADA, just breaking down, giving us that round trip phenomenon, full circle, sitting right on the lows. So again, very rare that this would just continue and smash lower for, I don't know, on something that's trading now sub $1. I wouldn't expect like another 10-cent drop or even like 25-cent drop in Cardano right off the bat. I would expect a little bit of a bounce. Again, a lower high, an equal low reattempt in short proximity of time. That's where the more favorable breakdown does come from. So I would watch out for that instead of just immediately trying to get it short here. Again, just like Bitcoin, I wouldn't call you crazy. If you are looking for that dead cat bounce to come, you could kind of go long in this area around the 80-cent mark. Your stop would have to go underneath these pivot lows. So just to give yourself a little bit of wiggle room, maybe that's like a 70-cent stop, or 70. I would try to probably be underneath that psychological 75-cent mark. It really depends on what your target is. If you think it's going to go here, then set it up so, your entry point is here. There's your reward. So that's roughly that. This here, that might make sense for like a 2.5 to 1 risk reward ratio. And that would kind of be, a little bit higher than this 0.771. Maybe it's 0.779 or something like that, just underneath the 0.78, something like that. You get the gist. Overall, again, I wouldn't call you crazy for looking for a long here for a dead cat bounce with a tight stop underneath. But I wouldn't overstay your welcome is the other half of that story, right? You're not looking for a full-blown reversal back on up to these highs. So trail your stop higher if that is the trade you take. And for shorts, I would be a little bit more patient, wait for the dead cat or just considerable sideways consolidation through time to build out a bit more of a healthy looking bear flag. All right, that's Cardano. And just to give you an idea of downside targets, we talked about upside there at that 91-cent mark. To the downside, what do we have underneath us? It's been a while since we looked this far left on Cardano. It's back down towards 40 cents, right? Actually, we have talked about this. We've talked about, how that would be a roughly 50% loss if you didn't respect the stop loss underneath 80 cents, right? So we've talked about that in the past. Moving along here, Solana. What do we see in Solana? SOL. Oops, we don't want to type C. We want to command. There we go. That's a more respectful zoom for your eyeballs, I'm sure. Nonetheless, this one's getting closer to that same sort of phenomenon. 100% retracement target would be here at $83. Looking for the breakdown. If we do something like this, notice how we had equal lows around that 95 roughly. We'll just round up. And currently, as of the recording of this video, we are starting to break down underneath that with a solid red-bodied candle. So as of right now, it strikes me as a flush point bearish underneath this descending triangle. And again, the target is down here at 83. If there is a magical turnaround, I wouldn't really even want to participate in this overall zone. I would want to wait for something that does this maybe. Then it's, very, very sloppy. I 100% agree with you if that's what you're saying in your head as I draw this. But maybe it's a double bottom that looks like this. I would just basically want to see some more price acceptance up above this 108 pivot where that last lower high, clear and obvious lower high, was really put in. So that's what we've got to the long side. Again, downside down here at 83, just like we've talked about in Cardano. If you were looking to scoop it up long down here, I wouldn't call you crazy. Tight stop, looking for a dead cat bounce and a retest of the flush point there could also be a trade idea. Next op, Polkadot, I guess was trying to come out as well as I was saying that, is Polkadot nonetheless, right? So this one, much easier range to identify here, sitting at the end of bottom end of balance. There's opportunity here, right? So this one, we are looking for either a reversal for mean reversion, your target's the midpoint of the range, roughly $20, or a breakdown. Based on what's going on here, I would say it's not a long just yet because we have a solid bodied red candle coming off of lower highs, a little bit of a dead cat there, lower highs, right? So I wouldn't long it just yet, but if this wants to do something like this and then pop back up above, we know that that could constitute a look below and fail. It's happened before, look below and fail, target top end of the range coming from this prior high here. That could be a setup, so I would keep a close eye on that, and this level down here is roughly 16. Another thing you could watch out for is, let's say that this daily bar does this, and it currently looks kind of nasty, but then it closes something like this. What did I just draw, right? A hammer candle. So if that forms down here, long over the highs, looking for that mean reversion, and then potentially, monitoring for continuation into the top of the range at 23. So Polkadot looks really attractive here for some sort of trade. For a breakdown, I probably wouldn't chase it here and just, short it right off the bat. Instead, I would want to see something that does this and a lower high underneath 16. Your short entry is on the back test or a breakdown of this equal low right here. And again, this could happen anywhere, not where I'm drawing it specifically. Something that I do want to do just because we are making equal lows is I've already fired it up here. We have the chalk and money flow, CMF people call it, down below. And this is just one of those studies. You could use the RSI, the MACD, whatever. I like to use the CMF. Nonetheless, what I'm getting at here is we have all of these roughly equal lows. So 1, 2, 3, 4. What is our CMF doing? You could call this a little bit of a positive divergence. Again, this is kind of breaking the trend of the initial low and then touch 1 here, but you get the gist, right? Technically speaking, there is some sort of divergence going on, which would point to a more bullish indication instead of a short one. Usually we don't use these extra indicators, but because, crypto is so boring right now and, it's not really trending a whole lot, I wanted to add an extra layer of just sort of analysis. So that is what this is down here. I believe I can do this and you can see CMF, no special settings, nothing. It is the default, but you get the gist, right? A little bit of positive divergence in Polkadot here as we approach the bottom end of the range. So to me, it would be more favorable for a mean reversion type trade. Let's continue along and get into crypto.com coin. We'll turn that back off. And as we know in this one, we did break underneath this support trend line. Very, very horrible drawing I just did, but you get the gist. We are underneath that. We are breaking down underneath this level right here. We did see a little dead cat bounce. So there is certainly possibility that this does see more, follow through to the downside, closer to that 33-ish cent mark coming from our prior lows here. And also, if we scrunch up the chart, the first major pullback after the ICO launch right there. So 33 cents is on our radar as a target. This one is clearly in a downtrend. It's not really respecting any sort of daily range. If we were to do that, maybe it's sort of this, and you could call this the bottom end of the range. I just doesn't strike me as the same as some of the other ranges that we've seen so far in today's video. So instead, just again, looking for more follow through to the downside here in crypto.com coin. For longs, it's got to prove itself with a higher low above 40 cents. Until that happens, not really feeling too confident about the long side. Matic USD, what's going on in Matic? Again, breakdown underneath this level right here. Nasty move to the downside, sitting right on 115 support. Where's that coming from, you might ask? Prior shelf right here. It's the first higher low before this thing kind of got in gear right there after the major pullback. So that's where we're at. Again, I probably wouldn't look to long this right off the bat. Instead, I would want to see, can we print some sort of either reversal pattern down here or structural bar? So just a simple hammer candle that would indicate more of a reversal. And your obvious target would just be a backtest of the flush point from right around in here, around 135. Okay, so you can clearly see descending triangle. That is the big hurdle to the long side. So scalpers, fine, looking for longs, if we print that reversal bar for the back test here, but for more of you longer term traders, you want to see that level recaptured with a higher low, and then you're looking for longs, okay? Next up, we have Luna or Terra. And this was, exhibiting some decent relative strength with this little bull flag that was going on, but clearly just breaking back down. My main concern about this now is not only do we have a failed backtest of the support trend line, but we are also starting to get the head and shoulders phenomenon here. The neckline is, of course, at 77.36. We talked about this in last week's video. It doesn't mean it's a short just yet, but if this neckline does, give out, look left, thin structure in here, I would imagine that we could very quickly come down towards that 58.61 level. So definitely keeping this one on your radar for short opportunities underneath 77. To the long side, again, nothing really interesting happens until we can take out roughly 95. And currently, with the given look in here, the failed bull flag doesn't strike me as a likely opportunity into this upcoming weekend or upcoming week in general. Next up, we've got Mana USD. This is, of course, our Decentraland metaverse play. There were some decent suggestions. Sandbox was another good one. There was Wild World as another suggestion. But for now, we're just going to keep it on Mana. I took a look at all those charts, and they all look exactly the same as this, essentially for all intents and purposes. So we'll just keep it on this since it is familiar for now. Completely falling off of a cliff. Again, I wouldn't chase this short here. It also does not look attractive for longs. We're basically moving through this thin structure. This line here at 160 is coming from a prior set of highs in there. But I don't know how much faith I would put in that, certainly, for trying to pick a bottom. Instead, I would watch for this structure to be retraced and then maybe more seriously reevaluate trying to pick that bottom if we come closer to $1 even. So that is a little bit more exciting to me. But again, I wouldn't really be bottom fishing in here, especially without a more significant structural level. Notice how we blast right up through it, thin structure, very easily could blast right on down through it as well. For longs, if it does turn around here, again, that's fine. I wouldn't really be more confident until we can start putting in higher lows and changing that trend. For now, the bears are just kind of in full control here in Decentraland and our metaverse plays. AVAX for Avalanche is our next coin, breaking down underneath the support trend line, no longer in play there. A little bit of a back test, right? Ultimately falling back down underneath, and also underneath horizontal support as of right now, underneath 65. So this one does look like it could come all the way back down to the bottom end of the range here. Traditionally, that is you're filling up the triangle, right? Boom, there you go. So that would be 54.50, call it 55 even, is your target inside of AVAX. If you are not short and you want to get short this, that's fine. I wouldn't do it now. I would wait for either a retest of 65 and short it here, or on a breakdown of whatever low ultimately gets put in, just for trend continuation, right? So that's what we've got in our main coins that we've been keeping tabs on for a while. Let's get on over to Ape USD. We covered this on its, basically right around in here. It really just, died right out after the big ICO push. But after that, it sort of fell off my radar. I'll certainly admit that. But look at this nice little trend that's starting to form to the upside. It's a little bit of a refreshing thing to see, essentially, given that everything else that we've looked at is fairly dismal looking. So nonetheless, what are we watching out for here? Well, as of right now, let's go ahead and clear this drawing setup, actually. We'll remove all. We're going to start from scratch. This strikes me as an important support. This is our resistance. You can see that we had resistance there. We form a bit of an ascending triangle underneath. We break. Any retests of 17 that hold or print some sort of hammer down here do look interesting for long opportunities. Looking to buy the break of that hammer high to revisit the highs in here. That's roughly, I don't know, is that 29.50 or my eyeball is mistaking me? Let's check that out. All right, 27.62 to be exact, based on the high of that wick. But nonetheless, you get the gist, right? So the trade idea is essentially this: pullback, support at the breakout point, then a revisit to these highs. From there, monitor for continuation into the all-time high. What's that level going to be? So let's throw that on there, roughly 41. That could be something to monitor for here. If we do break down underneath 17, sort of just means the trade's off the table, right? If there's no reversal bar down here, if there's no bounce, if there's nothing going on there, again, this strikes me as a likely opportunity or scenario, just back down inside of this choppy range. And obviously anything that breaks $10.50, say goodbye, and easily moving back down through some of that thin structure on the coin launch day. So that's going to wrap up the weekly, not weekly watch list, but the weekend crypto report. Getting my videos mixed up. The weekly watch list video, however, will come out on Sunday as scheduled. And with all of that being said, I wish you a green trading week.